At 43 years old, Nathaniel Hayes knew the precise weight of the words, "not enough." They had settled into the marrow of his bones over a decade, a dull, constant ache that no amount of quiet dignity could soothe. His salary as a software architect was $67,000 a year, a number that felt both respectable and, in the orbit of his mother-in-law, profoundly inadequate. It was a sum that afforded him a modest, three-bedroom rental on Beattisford Road in Charlotte, a home filled with the scent of his wife Lena's cooking and the sound of his daughter Imani's laughter. It was a good life, a life of love and carefully managed budgets, but it was not, in Vivian's eyes, the life her daughter deserved. Vivian lived in a different Charlotte, a world of sprawling Myers Park estates and hushed, old money assumptions. Her home, a $2.1 million colonial masterpiece of white brick and perfectly manicured gardens, was a fortress of judgment from which she surveyed Nathaniel's life with a thinly veiled disappointment. Every visit was an exercise in subtle humiliation. His 2012 Toyota Camry, with 187,000 miles, parked behind her daughter's new $52,000 Lexus SUV. His $89 Timex watch catching the light next to her husband's $18,000 Patek Philippe. The gap between their worlds wasn't just financial. It was a chasm of perceived worth, and Nathaniel was always standing on the wrong side. He felt it most acutely in the silences, the moments after he'd answer a question about his job, and Vivian would offer a tight, bloodless smile and change the subject. It was in those moments that he heard it the loudest. Not enough. Not nearly enough. The situation was reaching a quiet, desperate breaking point. Imani, his brilliant, beautiful 8-year-old, needed braces, a projected cost of $6,000. His emergency fund, which he had painstakingly built to just over $7,000, would be all but wiped out. He and Lena sat at their simple, $400 oak dining table late one night, the bills spread out before them like a losing hand of cards. Rain streaked down the window panes, blurring the streetlights outside. "We can make it work, Nate," Lena said, her voice strained. She was trying to be brave, but he could see the shadow of her mother's anxieties in her eyes. "I can pick up some more shifts at the gallery." "You're already working 40 hours a week for a commission that barely covers gas," he said, his voice softer than he intended. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Her skin was cool. "We'll figure it out. I can sell some of the old server equipment I have in the garage. That might bring in $1,000. It felt like trying to fill an ocean with a thimble. He looked at his wife, the woman he had loved since they were college students, and saw the weariness pulling at the corners of her mouth. For 10 years, he had been a good husband and a devoted father. He had built their furniture by hand, packed Imani's lunch every single day, and fixed every leaky faucet and broken appliance himself to save money. He had loved Lena with a steady, unwavering devotion, but he was beginning to fear that Vivian was right. Love wasn't enough to fix the plumbing of a broken financial system. Love couldn't pay for braces. He had no idea, sitting there in the dim light of his rented kitchen, just how deep the betrayal ran, or that the forces aligning against him had nothing to do with love and everything to do with a cold, calculated timeline worth millions. Have you ever felt like you were being judged, not for who you are, but for what you have? Let us know your story in the comments below, because Nathaniel's journey is one that so many of us can understand. The early years had been a fortress of their own making, built against the subtle chill that emanated from Myers Park. Nathaniel and Lena met at UNC Charlotte, two bright, ambitious black students with dreams that felt boundless. He was studying computer science, fascinated by the elegant logic of code. She was an art history major, her spirit as vibrant as the canvases she studied. Their love was easy, a conversation that started over coffee at a campus library, and never really ended. When he proposed, he did it with a simple, elegant $1,200 sapphire ring he'd saved for over 6 months, working a part-time job doing IT support. He did it on a crisp autumn afternoon in Freedom Park, the sunlight turning the lake to gold. Lena's yes was immediate, joyful, and absolute. Vivian's reaction was less so. When they visited her sprawling estate to share the news, she examined the modest ring on her daughter's finger with an unnerving stillness. She was a striking woman, her deep brown skin flawless, her elegant twists coiled perfectly atop her head. She wore a simple but obviously expensive navy blue sheath dress, probably a $1,500 St. John knit. "It's lovely, dear," Vivian said, her voice a low, smooth melody that failed to conceal the discordant note of disapproval. She turned to Nathaniel, her eyes sweeping over his $45 J. Crew polo shirt and clean but worn denim jeans. "And what is it you plan to do, Nathaniel? To provide for my daughter?" "I'm a programmer, Vivian," he said, keeping his voice even. "I have a good job with a tech firm downtown." "A job," she repeated, the word hanging in the air like a puff of smoke. She didn't need to say more. The implication was clear. A job was temporary, salaried, finite. It wasn't ownership. It wasn't a practice. It wasn't enough. Despite her reservations, the wedding went forward. It was a beautiful, modest ceremony at a local community church, the pews filled with their friends and Nathaniel's warm, sprawling family. He wore a simple, well-fitting $400 black suit. Lena was breathtaking in a $2,000 gown she'd found at a boutique downtown. The reception was in the church hall, catered by a local soul food restaurant for a little over $3,000. It was a day of profound joy, of gospel hymns and laughter that echoed off the high ceilings. Vivian endured it with the pained grace of a queen visiting a distant, slightly grubby colony. Her gift was a check for $10,000, presented with a card that read, "For a proper start." It felt less like a gift and more like a down payment on a debt she felt he already owed. They used that money, along with their own savings, for a down payment on their first home, a small $180,000 bungalow in the up-and-coming Noda neighborhood. It was perfect. Nathaniel spent weekends painting walls, installing new light fixtures, and building a bookshelf that covered an entire wall of the living room. When Imani was born 2 years later, he converted the spare bedroom into a nursery, painting sunshine yellow walls and assembling her $350 crib with the intense focus he usually reserved for lines of code. He would come home from his 9-to-5 job, which by then paid him a steady $55,000, and his world would transform. The stress of deadlines and office politics would melt away the moment he held his daughter. He'd sit in the $150 wooden rocking chair he'd bought secondhand and refurbished himself, humming old hymns his own mother, Mama Althea, used to sing. Lena would come in, tired from her day, but her face luminous, and lean down to kiss them both. In those moments, in that small, love-filled house, Nathaniel was the richest man in the world, but Vivian's world was always waiting just beyond their doorstep. Sunday dinners at the Myers Park house were a weekly performance. While Nathaniel helped clear the table, Vivian would hold court in her living room, a space dominated by a massive $15,000 Persian rug and abstract paintings that probably cost more than his car. "I was just speaking with Margaret," she'd announced to Lena, loud enough for Nathaniel to hear from the kitchen. Her son-in-law just made partner at Moore and Van Allen. They bought a lovely place at the lake. 4,200 square feet. Lena would just nod, her face unreadable. She was caught in the middle, loving her husband, but conditioned by a lifetime of her mother's values. The contrast was a constant grinding pressure. Vivian's life was about acquisition and status, Nathaniel's was about creation and stability. She bought $800 Manolo Blahnik shoes. He resoled his $120 Johnston and Murphy work shoes until they couldn't be saved. She had her gardens professionally landscaped for $5,000 a season. He spent his Saturdays pulling weeds and planting tomatoes in his own small backyard patch. This quiet, domestic normalcy, the life he had so carefully built, was the facade. He thought it was a fortress. He didn't realize it was a stage, and the final act had already been written by someone else. The campaign of 1,000 cuts escalated so gradually that Nathaniel almost didn't see it as a coordinated attack. He saw it only as Vivian's nature, her casual cruelty, her obsession with the superficial tapestry of wealth. But the cuts were strategic, each one designed to sever another thread of Lena's faith in him, in them. The first deep gash came at a family dinner celebrating his and Lena's 7th anniversary. It was held at Vivian's estate, of course. She had prepared an elaborate meal. As they sat around the massive, polished mahogany table worth at least $20,000, Vivian turned the conversation, as she always did, to money. "Richard is taking me to Paris for our anniversary next month," she announced, dabbing her lips with a heavy linen napkin. "First class, of course. He says after 35 years I've earned it." She looked at Nathaniel, a predatory glint in her eye. "What are you two doing for your special day?" Lena shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "We're going to Asheville for the weekend. We found a lovely little bed and breakfast." "How, quaint," Vivian said. The word was a weapon, wrapped in velvet. "Nate, I hope you don't mind me being frank. You're a smart man, but this programming thing, is there a future in it? A real future? Lena has such potential. She could be running a major gallery, traveling the world. She shouldn't be limited." The insult was breathtaking in its directness. Nathaniel felt the blood rush to his face. He placed his fork down carefully. "My programming thing, Vivian, is called software architecture. And yes, there's a future in it. I'm building things that will be used by millions of people." Vivian waved a dismissive hand, her diamond bracelets, worth a collective $30,000, clattering softly. "Yes, yes, building things in a little dark room. I'm talking about building a life, a legacy." She turned to Lena, her voice softening into a conspiratorial purr. "All I want is for you to be secure, darling. Truly secure." Nathaniel looked at his wife, praying she would defend him, defend them. But Lena just stared at her plate, her silence of victory for her mother. The rest of the dinner passed in a thick, suffocating tension. The $300 bottle of wine Vivian had served tasted like ash in his mouth. The humiliations became more public. For Imani's 5th birthday, Nathaniel spent 2 months in his garage, building her a magnificent child-sized wooden car she could sit in, complete with a working steering wheel and wheels that spun. He'd painted it her favorite color, a vibrant purple. It was a work of love, costing him about $200 in materials and countless hours of his time. On the day of the party, held in their small backyard, Imani's squeal of delight when she saw it was one of the proudest moments of his life. An hour later, Vivian arrived. She wasn't empty-handed. 2 men followed her, carrying a gigantic, professionally assembled Victorian dollhouse. It was a $1,200 monstrosity from a high-end toy catalog, complete with tiny, electrified chandeliers and miniature furniture. It instantly dwarfed Nathaniel's handcrafted gift. "Oh, what a darling little cart you made, Nate," Vivian said, barely glancing at it. "Imani, darling, Grandma brought you a real house for your dolls." The children at the party, drawn by the sheer scale and novelty of the dollhouse, abandoned the purple car and swarmed the new toy. Nathaniel watched as Imani, after a moment of hesitation, followed them. He saw the flicker of confusion and then excitement on her face. He felt something inside him crack. It wasn't just about being upstaged. It was about the lesson being taught to his daughter. What a man builds with his own two hands is worthless, next to what a woman can buy with her money. But the moment that etched itself permanently into his memory, the moment that became a recurring nightmare, happened in the beige, linoleum-floored auditorium of Imani's elementary school. It was the second-grade spring concert. Imani had a small speaking part. Nathaniel and Lena sat in the folding chairs, their faces beaming with pride. Vivian had, surprisingly, agreed to come, sitting between them like a silent, regal judge. Imani walked to the microphone, her beaded braids clicking softly with each step. She looked out at the crowd, found her father's face, and smiled. She delivered her 2 lines perfectly. The audience applauded politely. Nathaniel jumped to his feet, clapping and whistling, tears welling in his eyes. He was so consumed with pride that he didn't notice the stillness beside him until he sat back down. He looked over. Vivian was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, her expression placid, almost bored. She hadn't clapped. She hadn't even smiled. Later that night, as he was tucking Imani into bed, she looked up at him with her wide, serious eyes. "Daddy?" "Yes." "Sweet pea?" "Grandma was there." "Yes, she was." "Wasn't that nice of her?" Imani's brow furrowed. She was tracing the patterns on her comforter. "Daddy," she said, her voice small and clear as a bell. "Grandma, why don't you clap for Daddy?" Nathaniel froze. He realized she wasn't asking him. She was repeating a question she had asked her grandmother directly. What did Grandma say when you asked her that, baby?" he asked, his heart pounding. "She said," Imani recited, with the perfect recall of a child, "We only clap for the winners, darling. Your father is still learning how to play the game." The cruelty of it stole his breath. To say that to a child, to poison her perception of her own father. That night, something in Nathaniel shifted. The hurt, which had been a dull ache for years, began to harden into a cold, dense knot of anger. He started to see the pattern. Vivian wasn't just a snob. She was a saboteur. The final phase of her campaign was the most insidious. She began to work on Lena directly, weaving a narrative of imminent financial collapse. He would overhear snippets of their phone calls. "But is he even contributing to a 401k, Lena? At his age? That car isn't safe for Imani. What if it breaks down on the highway?" "Meek, a man's pride is a fine thing, darling, but it doesn't pay the bills. You have to think about your future. Your future." Lena grew distant, anxious. The easy laughter that had once filled their home became rare. She started talking about money constantly, using phrases he recognized from her mother. "We need to be realistic, Nate. We're falling behind." He tried to reassure her, to show her their budget, their slow but steady progress. But he was fighting a ghost. He was fighting a decade of conditioning. Then came the news that should have changed everything. The small, struggling software startup he had joined 3 years prior, taking a pay cut to $67,000 in exchange for a significant block of founders' equity, had been acquired. It was a massive deal. The company was going public. His unvested shares, which were on a 4-year cliff vesting schedule, were suddenly worth a fortune. The final block of his equity, the lion's share, was set to vest in 6 months on October 15th. The total value was projected to be $11.4 million. He sat Lena down at their oak table, his hands trembling with excitement. "Lena, honey, you're not going to believe this." He explained the acquisition, the IPO, the vesting schedule. He showed her the preliminary paperwork. "In 6 months, baby? 6 months? We're going to be okay. more than okay. All this stress, it's over." He expected her to cry, to scream, to jump into his arms. Instead, she just stared at the papers, her expression guarded. "6 months?" she said slowly. "So, we don't have the money now." "No, not yet, but it's coming. It's guaranteed." "A lot can happen in 6 months, Nate," she said, echoing a line he'd heard Vivian use a dozen times. "Let's not get our hopes up." She folded the papers and pushed them back toward him. "I'm glad for you. I hope it works out." She got up and started washing the dishes, her back to him. The hope that had soared in his chest crashed to the floor. He had just handed her the winning lottery ticket, and she had looked at it as if it were a bill. He didn't understand. He didn't see that the game was already over. He thought he was 6 months from victory. In reality, he was 6 months from ruin, and his wife and her mother were holding the stopwatch. He had no idea what was coming. The discovery did not come like a lightning bolt. It came like a slow, creeping flood of ice water, seeping into the room until he was submerged in the cold, hard truth. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, October 14th, at 3:15 p.m. The day was gray and overcast, matching the storm inside him. A week earlier, Lena had told him she was leaving. She hadn't cried. Her face was a mask of placid resolve that he now recognized as a perfect imitation of her mother. "It's just not working, Nate," she'd said, standing in the doorway of their bedroom, already half gone. "I'm not happy. I need more." More. The word echoed Vivian's decade-long refrain. He was devastated, bewildered. He had begged her to go to counseling, to talk to him, to tell him what was wrong. She had refused. She moved out that weekend, taking Imani with her to the sprawling estate in Myers Park. She left behind a silence that was heavier than any object in the house. The divorce papers arrived via a courier the following Monday. They were cold, impersonal, and brutal in their efficiency. He was shell-shocked. 10 years of marriage, a child, a life built together, all of it reduced to a stack of legal documents demanding signatures. He did the only thing he could think to do. He called a lawyer. His attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense black woman named Alana Davis, who had been recommended by a colleague, had an office in a sleek glass tower in uptown Charlotte. The contrast between her world and his suddenly felt stark. Her hourly rate was $1,200. His entire emergency fund would be gone in less than 6 hours of her time. He sat across from her gleaming mahogany desk, the city skyline behind her, and told her everything. He told her about the startup, the acquisition, the $11.4 million in equity. He told her the vesting date, October 15th, tomorrow. Ms. Davis leaned forward, her expression sharpening. "Tomorrow? The final vesting is tomorrow?" "Yes, at 9 a.m., according to the company." "And she filed for divorce this week?" "Yes." Ms. Davis was silent for a long moment. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on her desk. "In North Carolina, equity that vests during the marriage is considered marital property. Equity that vests after the date of separation is generally considered separate property." She looked him straight in the eye. "The timing here is remarkably coincidental." She made a call. "I'm requesting full discovery from her counsel. Everything. Emails, texts, financial statements, handwritten notes, everything." The documents arrived via a secure digital link that afternoon. Ms. Davis's paralegal printed the entire file, a stack of paper nearly a foot high. Nathaniel went to her office to review it. The room was quiet, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of paper. He started with the emails, then the texts. It was all there, a slow drip of poison from Vivian to Lena over the past year, chipping away at her confidence, her loyalty. "He has no ambition, darling. You'll be 40 and still living in a rental. You have to protect yourself. A man like that will drag you down with him. Then he got to a subfolder labeled Strategy. He clicked it open. There was a single scanned document inside. The file name was L-SEP_timeline_v4.pdf. His heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He opened it. The document was 2 pages long, a typed-out, bullet-pointed plan. At the top, in a crisp, professional font, it read, Lena, Separation Strategy and Timeline. He scanned the points, his vision blurring. Phase 1, Emotional Detachment, April to June. Goal: create emotional distance, reduce shared activities, increase time spent at Myers Park. Phase 2, Financial Argument, July. Goal: initiate conflict over fabricated financial concerns, refuse counseling, establish a pattern of irreconcilable differences. Phase 3, Separation, August. Lena to move to Myers Park with Imani, crucial to establish a legal date of separation. Phase 4, Filing, October 1st to 10th. Retain counsel, prepare and file divorce petition, target filing date, October 9th. His blood ran cold. He scrolled down. There were handwritten notes in the margins, annotations in a familiar, elegant script. It was Vivian's handwriting. Next to the vesting schedule for his company, which was pasted into the document, she had written, must file before October 15th. All equity vesting before separation date is 50% ours. After is 0%. This is the entire ball game. And there, next to the line item showing the final massive block of shares, she had circled the date October 14th today and written, final deadline, no later. He felt the air leave his lungs. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. This was a corporate takeover, a meticulously planned heist. They had timed it to the day, a cold, predatory strike designed to capture half of his life's work, $5.7 million. The woman he had loved, the mother of his child, had been a willing participant in a scheme to gut him, orchestrated by the woman who had called him not enough for a decade. He sat back in the expensive leather chair, the papers trembling in his hand. The room was silent, but his mind was screaming. He looked at the date on the document again. They had planned to file on October 9th, but Lena's petition hadn't been filed until October 13th, yesterday. They were late. For some reason, their perfect plan had been delayed by 4 days. He looked at the calendar on his phone. Today was October 14th. The vesting was tomorrow. A strange, chilling calm washed over him, extinguishing the fire of his rage. It was the same feeling he got when he found a critical bug in millions of lines of code. The panic would subside, replaced by a pure, cold focus. He saw the whole system, the whole architecture of the betrayal, and he saw the flaw in their design. They had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated him. They thought he was a simple man. They had no idea he was an architect. And he was about to build their cage. The first rule of war is to never let your enemy know they've lost. Nathaniel understood this instinctively. The rage was a furnace inside him, but on the surface, he became a frozen lake. His new mission was simple: play the part they had cast for him. He would be the defeated, heartbroken husband, right up until the moment he wasn't. The first test came that evening. At 7:12 p.m., his phone rang. It was Lena. He let it ring 3 times, took a deep, steadying breath, and answered, pitching his voice to sound weary and broken. Hello? Nate? It's me. Her voice was cautious. I just wanted to see how you were doing. How do you think I'm doing, Lena? He asked, the words hollow. He was sitting in the dark of his living room, the damning timeline still open on his laptop screen, its glow illuminating his face. My wife left me. My daughter is gone. I'm not doing well. I'm so sorry, Nate. I never wanted to hurt you. It was a perfect line, delivered with practiced sincerity. He almost could have believed her if he hadn't read the script. Then why, Lena? Why didn't you just talk to me? We could have worked through anything. He was feeding her the cues she expected, playing the role of the bewildered victim. We couldn't, she said, and he could hear the frustration in her voice, the frustration of someone whose well-rehearsed plan was being questioned. You just don't get it. You never have. I guess I don't, he said, letting a long, painful silence hang in the air. He was a ghost in his own home, surrounded by the memories of a life that had been a lie. He looked at a framed photo on the mantelpiece. The three of them at the beach, Imani on his shoulders, Lena laughing. The photo was a prop from a play he didn't know he was in. I should go. I have a lot to figure out. Okay, Nate, she said, her relief palpable. We'll talk soon about the arrangements. He hung up without saying goodbye. He sat in the darkness for a full hour, not moving. He was compiling evidence in his mind, replaying the last 6 months, seeing every argument, every cold shoulder, every anxious comment from Lena, not as a moment of marital strife, but as a checklist item in Vivian's strategy. The next day was October 15th, the vesting day. He woke up at 5 a.m., long before the sun rose. He made coffee. He sat at his oak table and opened his laptop. He watched the clock. At 9 a.m., nothing happened. At 9:01 a.m., an email appeared in his inbox. The subject line, vesting confirmation. He opened it. The language was dry, corporate. This email serves to confirm that your final tranche of 250,000 Founders shares has vested as of 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, October 15th. He did a quick calculation based on the current stock price, $11.4 million. It was his, all of it. It had vested after the legal date of separation established by Lena's filing. It was his separate property. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He felt a profound, chilling stillness settle over him. He closed the laptop. He had won. But the game wasn't over. Now it was his turn to play. 2 days later, he agreed to meet with Lena and Vivian at the Myers Park estate to discuss the divorce settlement. He knew this was the scene where they expected him to crumble. He drove his 2012 Camry up the long, winding driveway and parked it behind a brand-new $95,000 Range Rover. He walked up to the towering front door and rang the bell. Vivian answered, dressed in an $8,700 Armani suit the color of cream. She looked powerful, triumphant. Nathaniel, do come in. He stepped into the cavernous marble foyer. Lena was standing by the grand staircase, looking pale and nervous. She wouldn't meet his eyes. They sat in the formal living room, the one with the $15,000 rug. Vivian took the lead, of course. We want to make this as painless as possible for Imani's sake, she began, her tone dripping with false magnanimity. Lena isn't seeking alimony. We only want what is fair. She slid a document across the polished surface of the $8,000 coffee table. It was a proposed settlement. They wanted the house, the one they had shared, which was now worth around $250,000 and had about $100,000 in equity. They wanted him to continue paying the mortgage. They wanted 70% of his 401k, which held about $88,000, and they wanted a child support payment that was calculated based on an income far greater than his $67,000 salary, a clear nod to the equity they believed they were entitled to. Nathaniel picked up the document and read it slowly. He let the silence stretch. He feigned confusion, then despair. This is everything, Vivian. This would ruin me. It's what's required to maintain the lifestyle Lena and Imani are accustomed to, Vivian said, her voice like ice. He looked at Lena. "Is this what you want?" She finally looked at him, her eyes pleading. "It's what's fair, Nate." He folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket. I need to think about this. I need to talk to my lawyer." He stood up, the picture of a broken man. "I'll be in touch." He walked out of that house, got into his old car, and drove away. He could feel their eyes on his back. Two predators watching their prey limp away. The dramatic irony was a shield against the pain. They thought they were watching a man at his lowest point. They had no idea they were watching a clock tick down to zero. The next time they saw him, he would not be the man who walked out of their house. He would be a force of nature they never saw coming. The week after the disastrous meeting at Myers Park was a blur of quiet, methodical preparation. Nathaniel moved like a man in a trance, his grief and rage channeled into a singular, focused purpose. He met with Alana Davis 3 times in her uptown office. Each meeting, billed at her $1,200 hourly rate, was a strategic masterclass. "They've made a fatal error," Ms. Davis said during their first planning session, her fingers steepled. She had Vivian's timeline printed out and highlighted on her desk. "They put their fraudulent intent in writing. In my 20 years of practicing family law, I have never seen an adversary hand me the murder weapon with their fingerprints still on it." Nathaniel felt a grim satisfaction. "So what's our move?" "Our move is absolute precision," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "We don't just win. We dismantle their entire position so thoroughly that they have no ground left to stand on. This is no longer a simple divorce. This is a case of conspiracy to commit fraud." The plan was multi-pronged and devastatingly simple. First, they would compile an airtight case. Nathaniel spent 2 full days combing through his old emails, phone records, and even credit card statements. Each piece was a small brick in the wall of evidence. An email from Vivian to a jeweler in January, asking about the cost of appraising Lena's wedding ring. A text from Lena in May, canceling a planned family vacation, citing a need for space. A direct match to Phase 1 of the timeline. A charge on their joint credit card from a restaurant near Lena's divorce attorney's office in early September, weeks before she had even told him she was unhappy. Each discovery was a fresh stab of pain, but he compartmentalized it. This wasn't his life anymore. It was Exhibit B, Exhibit C, Exhibit D. The total cost of the evidence compilation, including paralegal hours and forensic accounting, came to $18,500, a sum that would have terrified him a month ago. Now it was just an investment. The second part of the plan was timing. "We strike next Monday," Ms. Davis declared, "at 11 a.m. sharp." "Why then?" Nathaniel asked. "Because Vivian hosts a weekly brunch for her socialite friends on Mondays at 10:30. I know this because my mother used to be one of them," Ms. Davis said with a wry smile. "We want an audience. We want her to be served not just with legal papers, but with a side of public humiliation. She traffics in reputation. We will bankrupt her." The third and most crucial element was the financial strike. Ms. Davis's team prepared an emergency motion to be filed simultaneously with their counter petition. It would seek to freeze every single one of Vivian's assets, her bank accounts, her investment portfolio, her real estate holdings, pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. "We will argue that she is a flight risk and has already demonstrated a clear intent to defraud you, and therefore may attempt to hide or liquidate assets," Ms. Davis explained. "The judge will grant it. It will cut off her oxygen." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place unexpectedly. On Friday, Nathaniel received a call from a journalist at Forbes magazine. They had been doing a feature on the tech acquisition and wanted to profile the quiet architect behind the platform's core innovation. They wanted to do a photo shoot. "I don't know," Nathaniel said, hesitant. I'm a private person. Nate, the journalist urged, your story is incredible. Bootstrapped your way up, worked for a startup that everyone thought would fail, and now you're sitting on a 9-figure valuation. It's the American dream. He thought about it for a moment. He thought about Vivienne's words. We only clap for the winners. Okay, he said, his voice firm. I'll do it. The photo shoot was on Saturday. They had him stand in front of the sleek glass facade of his old office building, his arms crossed, his expression not smiling, but calm, confident, and resolute. He wore a simple, dark gray $600 suit he had purchased for the occasion. He looked like a man who knew his worth. The article, the journalist told him, was slated to be the digital cover story. It would go live on Monday morning. The pieces were all in place, the evidence, the legal motions, the public validation, all set to converge on a single point in time. Monday, 11 a.m. Nathaniel spent Sunday in his small, quiet rental apartment on Beatty's Ford Road. He packed a bag for Imani, full of her favorite books, and a new set of drawing pencils. He was arranging to have full custody while the legal battle ensued, and he wanted her to have a comfortable space waiting for her. He was building again. But this time he wasn't building a bookshelf. He was building a new life. He felt no joy, no thirst for revenge. Only a profound and unshakable stillness. The storm was coming, and he was the calm at its center. Monday morning dawned cool and bright, a perfect autumn day. At 9:01 a.m., Nathaniel's phone buzzed with a notification from a news app. It was a link to the Forbes article. He clicked it. The headline was stark and bold against a picture of his own face, the architect of tomorrow. How Nathaniel Hayes quietly built an $11.4 million future. His deep brown skin looked luminous in the morning light, his expression unreadable and powerful. He read the article. It detailed his journey, his work, the acquisition, and the staggering value of his equity. It was a public declaration of the very success Vivienne had tried to steal. He sent the link to Ms. Davis with a simple message. The cover is live. Her reply was instant. Excellent. The board is set. At 10:30 a.m., in a sun-drenched garden room in Myers Park, Vivienne was holding court. Her weekly brunch was in full swing. 12 women, all dressed in expensive casual wear, sat around small tables, sipping mimosas from $150 crystal flutes. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and gossip. Lena was there, looking more relaxed than she had in months, a guest in her mother's triumphant narrative. Vivienne, radiant in a yellow Carolina Herrera day dress worth at least $2,800, was telling a story. Her audience captivated. They were celebrating Lena's newfound freedom. At 11 a.m. sharp, a man in a nondescript suit walked through the open French doors leading from the garden. He was polite but firm. I'm looking for Vivienne Devereaux and Lena Hayes, he said, his voice cutting through the light chatter. Vivienne turned, her smile faltering. I am Vivienne Devereaux. Can I help you? You've both been served, the man said, extending 2 thick manila envelopes. Vivienne's face tightened with annoyance. She took the envelopes, her expression one of distaste, as if handling something unclean. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, already dismissing the man as he turned and walked away. The room had gone silent. 12 pairs of eyes were fixed on her. She tore open her envelope with a sharp, impatient gesture. Lena did the same, her hands trembling slightly. Vivienne's eyes scanned the first page, the counter petition for divorce, alleging fraud and conspiracy. Her face, which had been a mask of arrogant amusement, went slack with confusion. What is this nonsense? She scoffed, flipping the page. Fraud? He has no... Her voice trailed off. Her breath hitched. She was looking at the second document in the stack. It was Exhibit A. It was a perfect, high-resolution copy of her own 2-page document, Lena, Separation Strategy and Timeline. Her handwritten notes were there in stark black and white. Must file before October 15th. This is the entire ball game. The color drained from Vivian's face. Her deep brown skin turned a sickly, ashen gray. The room was so quiet you could hear the fizzing of the bubbles in the abandoned mimosas. She looked up from the paper, her eyes wide with dawning horror, and met the shocked, questioning stares of her friends. Her reputation, the currency she valued above all else, was evaporating in real time. She flipped to the next document. It was the court order, emergency motion, to freeze assets. The legal language was dense, but the words, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, and real property were impossible to miss. Her entire financial world, the $2.1 million house, the stocks, the liquid cash, was now locked away, untouchable. Lena was staring at her own copy, her face a mask of disbelief. She looked from the damning timeline to her mother, her expression crumbling from confusion into the sickening dawn of comprehension. "Mother?" she whispered, the word a fragile, broken thing. "What is this? What did you do?" Vivian didn't answer. She couldn't. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from her bank's wealth manager, then another, then an email from her brokerage firm. The freeze was instantaneous. She was, for all intents and purposes, broke. At that exact moment, one of the women at the brunch, scrolling on her phone to escape the suffocating awkwardness, gasped, "Oh my God, Vivian, look at this." She turned her phone around. It was the Forbes article. It was Nathaniel's face, looking out at them all, calm and victorious. The headline screamed his success and their failure. The brunch ended abruptly. The women fled as if escaping a house on fire, whispering amongst themselves. Lena was weeping, slumped in a chair. Vivian stood frozen in the center of the room, the legal papers clutched in her hand. Her meticulously constructed world shattered around her. Her phone started ringing. It was Nathaniel's number. She ignored it. It rang again. Voicemail. She didn't listen. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a transcript of the voicemail, sent from one of Ms. Davis's paralegals. Voicemail 1, 11:15 a.m. Vivian, it's Nathaniel. I assume you've received my response. I suggest you have your lawyer call mine. We have a lot to discuss. His voice was calm, controlled, devastatingly precise. An hour later, another voicemail. This one from Lena. Voicemail 2, 12:22 p.m. Sound of sobbing. Nate, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the details. She told me it was just to make things fair. Oh God, what have I done? Please call me. Nathaniel didn't call. He sat in his quiet apartment, listening to the city sounds outside his window. The strike was complete. The silence that followed was the sound of his victory. He felt no elation, just a great, hollowing emptiness and the quiet, steady resolve to see it through to the end. The real consequences were only just beginning to cascade. The aftermath was not a loud explosion, but a slow, systematic collapse. The consequences cascaded one by one, dismantling Vivian's life with the same cold precision she had used to plan Nathaniel's ruin. Each downfall was a direct and measurable result of her own actions, a debt coming due with interest. First came the financial ruin. The emergency freeze on her assets was ironclad. With her accounts locked, Vivian had no access to liquid cash. The $2.1 million Myers Park estate suddenly became an albatross. The property taxes, over $30,000 a year, were due. The landscaping service, which cost $5,000 a season, sent an overdue notice. The country club, with its $2,000 monthly dues, suspended her membership. She tried to use her American Express Centurion card, the legendary Black Card, with its $5,000 annual fee, to pay for a consultation with a new, more aggressive lawyer. It was declined. The asset freeze extended to her lines of credit. For the first time in her adult life, Vivian Devereaux was powerless. Second was the social implosion. The story of the brunch, the process server, and the Forbes article spread through the tight-knit, gossipy world of Charlotte's elite like wildfire. The narrative was irresistible. The matriarch who tried to swindle her working-class son-in-law, only to be outmaneuvered and exposed on the very day he was publicly crowned a multi-millionaire. Her phone stopped ringing. Invitations to galas and charity luncheons dried up. The friends who had sipped her mimosas now crossed the street to avoid her. Reputation, her most prized asset, had been rendered worthless. Third, the legal battle was a bloodbath. Vivian's initial arrogance quickly dissolved into panicked desperation. She hired and fired 3 different law firms, each one more expensive than the last, digging herself into a hole of legal debt. Ms. Davis countered every motion with calm, irrefutable evidence. The written timeline was the centerpiece of their case, a confession of intent that no lawyer could spin. The court, seeing the clear evidence of attempted fraud, was not sympathetic. In a preliminary hearing, the judge ordered Vivian to pay for Nathaniel's legal fees, which had already soared past $150,000. To cover the cost, she was forced to petition the court to allow the sale of a portfolio of municipal bonds, the very core of her old money inheritance. She was liquidating her legacy to pay for her greed. Fourth, her relationship with her daughter was irrevocably shattered. Lena, faced with the undeniable proof of her mother's manipulation, had a complete breakdown. She was trapped in the gilded cage of the Myers Park estate, with the woman who had ruined her marriage and her life. The veil had been lifted, and she now saw her mother not as a protector, but as a predator who had used her as a pawn. Their conversations, once full of shared confidences, became clipped, bitter exchanges, or long, resentful silences. Lena was forced to get a job, a real one, as a cashier at a home goods store, earning $15 an hour. The humiliation was a daily torment. Finally, the divorce settlement was a public execution of her plan. The judge, citing gross misconduct and fraudulent intent on the part of Lena and her mother, awarded Nathaniel 100% of his now vested equity. It was his separate property, untainted by their scheme. He was also awarded full physical custody of Imani. The marital home they had shared was to be sold, with the $100,000 in equity split. But Lena's half was immediately garnished to help pay the court-ordered legal fees she and her mother owed Nathaniel. In the end, Lena walked away from her 10-year marriage with nothing but a mountain of debt and a fractured relationship with her child. Vivian, after being forced by the court to sell her beloved Myers Park estate to cover legal fees and the remaining settlement costs, was reduced to renting a small, $2,200 a month condo in South Park. It was a nice address, but it was a humiliating downgrade from her throne. She had played the game, and she had lost everything. Nathaniel, in his quiet victory, never sent a gloating text or made a triumphant call. He simply let the consequences of their own choices fall where they may. He was too busy building a future to waste time looking at the ruins of their past. 1 year later, the world was a different place. The rain of the past had given way to a steady, healing sunlight. Nathaniel no longer lived in the small rental on Beatty's Ford Road. He had bought a house, a beautiful but understated $1.2 million modern home in the Dilworth neighborhood. known for its quiet, tree-lined streets and strong sense of community. It had a large backyard with a garden, where rows of tomatoes and kale grew, their green leaves reaching for the sun. The house was filled with light, but more importantly, it was filled with laughter, Imani's laughter. He hadn't gone on a spending spree. The 2012 Camry was gone, replaced by a safe and reliable $60,000 Volvo XC90. He hadn't bought a fancy watch. The $89 Timex still sat on his nightstand. He had left the tech world, cashing out a small portion of his equity to live comfortably and focus on what mattered. He was a full-time father. He packed Imani's lunch every morning. He drove her to school. He was there for every concert, every soccer game, every small victory. He was present. One Saturday afternoon, he was in the garden, pulling weeds, when Imani ran out to him, a piece of paper clutched in her hand. Her hair, which he had learned to style into two neat, beautiful puffs, bounced as she ran. "Daddy, Daddy, I drew a picture for you," she announced, her voice breathless with excitement. She unfolded the paper. It was a drawing of two figures standing in front of a house with a garden. They were holding hands. She had used a rich, dark brown crayon to color in their skin. A bright yellow sun shone down on them. "This is our house," she explained, pointing, "and this is the garden, and this is you, Daddy." She pointed to the taller figure, who wore a gold, scribbled crown on his head. "And you're a king." Nathaniel felt a familiar warmth swell in his chest. "I am? Why am I a king, sweet pea?" Imani looked up at him, her expression serious. "Because you're strong and you always build things for me," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Her simple, devastating honesty was the only validation he had ever needed. A few weeks later, he stood on a stage in the auditorium of Johnson C. Smith University, a historically black university in the heart of Charlotte. He was wearing the same $600 gray suit from the Forbes photo shoot. In front of him were students, faculty, and members of the community. He was here to announce the launch of a new scholarship. "My mother, Dr. Althea Hayes, was a teacher," he began, his voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone. "She believed that the greatest investment we can make is in the minds and futures of our young people. She taught me that true wealth isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the strength of your character and the legacy you build for others." He looked out at the sea of hopeful young black faces. "For 10 years, I was told I was not enough. I let that voice become the architect of my own self-doubt. But I've learned that your worth is not determined by someone else's ruler. It is determined by what you build, what you create, and what you give back. Today," he continued, "I am honored to announce the establishment of the Dr. Althea Hayes Memorial Scholarship, an endowment of $2 million to provide full, 4-year tuition for 10 students in the STEM fields at this university every single year, in perpetuity." The auditorium erupted in applause. It was thunderous, genuine, and overwhelming. This time, the clapping wasn't for a winner in a game. It was for a builder, a founder. Later that evening, sitting on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, his phone buzzed. It was a text from a number he didn't have saved, but he knew who it was. Lena. The message was one word: "I'm sorry." He read the text. He thought of the years of quiet humiliation, the coldness, the betrayal. He thought of the pain. Then he thought of Imani sleeping soundly upstairs, of the garden growing in his yard, of the 10 students whose lives would be changed. He felt a sense of peace, a quiet release. He had forgiven them long ago, not for their sake, but for his own. He couldn't build a future while carrying the weight of the past. He put the phone down, screen side down, on the table. He didn't reply. He just sat there, breathing in the cool night air, watching the first stars begin to appear in the twilight sky. True wealth is not something you can inherit or steal. It is something you must build. It is built not with money, but with integrity, resilience, and love. It's the safety you create for your children, the community you uplift, and the peace you find within yourself when you finally realize you have always been more than enough. What do you think is the true measure of a person's worth? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of justice and empowerment.